Houston, we have a problem. We have a problem. We have a problem.
This is Houston. Say again, please.
Houston, we have a problem.
Houston.